see here.
Hello,
Hi.
hello. Hello,
Do
hello.
we have Mel in the house yet?
We
There he
have
is. Mr.
Mel.
Mr.
Yeah.
Clutch. Got it figured out. We love
Well,
it.
I
We
gotta
love it.
plug my phone in so that doesn't run out of power. So give me a second.
Okay. I love technology.
Yeah.
This is what we do live on the fly. You know what? Mel said it's just been a comedy of errors from a technology standpoint for him today. I just put him on mute while he plugs in.
Okay, great. Hey
Yeah.
everybody. Welcome to our Friday Facebook Live. Very, very live. I am actually here at the farm in upstate New York. I'm actually here for the month of July. Had to get away from the brutal heat in Austin, Texas, and so this room that I'm in, maybe you guys recognize this. This was in Forks Over Knives, the documentary. In chat, why don't you guys show me how many of you actually have seen Forks Over Knives? Would love to see that.
Can I put 2 hands up? Yes, Mel. And
Yep.
Mel, thumbs up, right? You can hear us okay? Excellent. Perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
And you can hear me, correct?
We
Oh, we
can.
can.
We can. And
Addie is my new
everybody,
favorite human, by the way. Addie V. I'm just going to pop that up on the screen because I need to see that. Carrie's looking gorgeous. Thank you very much. I'll take that off the screen now, but I'm carrying that with my heart.
I have lost kind of not 100%, but I'm losing my voice. I think I've been talking too much the last couple of days, so excuse my my voice. Also excuse the goatee. This is left over from our trip to Alaska a couple weeks ago, and it's just kind of a little bit of a summer growth of sorts. But our guest today is Mel Weinstein. Mel, it's an absolute privilege to have you on the podcast. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Rev.
And you never know who's going to pop in today. Ann's jumping in here, I guess, a little bit. But Mel, you were on the podcast yesterday. We aired your podcast. We had a great conversation, and so this is just kind of a little follow up. And we wanted to bring in the audience to see if they had any questions that between you, myself, Carrie, now Ann, if there's anything that we could help them with as far as reading labels, fast food ingredients. The title of your book, Mel, is Fast Food Ingredients Revealed. What are you eating? Do you have a copy there you can show us?
Yes, I do.
There it is.
There it is.
Fast food
So
ingredients.
why don't we kick off with this for those that haven't seen and listened to the podcast. Mel, why should we listen to what you have to say about ingredients? What's your background? What's your authority?
Okay, I've been interested in food ingredients for quite a long time now. I didn't get serious about it until 2016, when I decided that because of my background and experience, I had a lot of information I could share with people. So at that point, I started a podcast called Food Labels Revealed, which is still going. It's a monthly podcast, and it's based upon my my degree in chemistry. I also had some education in graduate food science. And I worked as a chemistry teacher in a community college for 10 plus years. And also after that, I was an analytical chemist for a very large multinational food ingredient company called Tate & Lyle. I did that for 20 years. So between the teaching and the analytical chemistry position that I held and my interest in food, I gathered a lot of information over the last, let's say, 30 years as regards food, the health situation related to food and food ingredients. And then this book that I wrote, and it was published at the very end of 2022, is focused specifically on food ingredients and fast food. such as McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. Those are the 3 restaurants that I focused attention on.
So Mel, fantastic background there. So if any of us were to eat at a fast food restaurant, is there one that you would recommend above all others based upon your research?
Well, that's a very tough question. I can't think of one fast food restaurant that advertises themselves as healthy, as good for your longevity. So I can't really put an answer to that question. There's some that are better than others. Unfortunately, according to laws that have been passed by Congress, restaurants are excluded from having to reveal the ingredients that they use in their foods. And I'm not talking about the components of the food, such as like in a hamburger, you have the bun, you have the burger itself, you might have lettuce, you might have sauce of some kind. Those are the components. But if you actually then ask the question, what's in the sauce, what's in the burger, what's in the pickles, those are what I'm referring to as the ingredients. So
Wow.
if you're really interested in health and wanting to know what you're eating at a fast food restaurant, you're somewhat out of luck, except in my research, in one podcast, I was thinking about, okay, when you go to the store and you buy a food item, if it's a packaged food item, canned, whatever, it's required to have a food label on it that lists all the ingredients, from the most prominent to the least amount. And that's not the case for restaurants. Restaurants were given, were not required. There was no requirement, no mandatory requirement on restaurants to list food ingredients. All right, now,
why in the world is that? How did they get away with highway robbery like that?
Deep pockets, probably, right?
I'm not a congressman, so I can't answer that. I'm sure there was a lot of
lobbyists,
a lot of companies were making sure that they would not be included in that requirement. So,
but Mel, pardon my interruption. Like the 3 that you chose to highlight in your book specifically, Taco Bell, McDonald's, and was it Kentucky Fried Chicken?
No,
Pizza Hut. There was an ingredient that, like you chose those 3 because they were the most transparent about putting up all of their ingredients and nutrition compositions online. And so those were really some of the only ones that you could find. And the eye-opening part of that was in the podcast with Rip. You talked about a crispy chicken Caesar salad. And, we think that it's healthy, but you expose that there were about 140, 150 different ingredients within that particular salad, down to the bleaching agent of croutons.
Right. And that was a KFC menu item.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you said, the chicken Caesar salad croutons.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Mel?
Well, if I go back to the beginning of the question, in defense of restaurants, you could understand why local restaurants would be excluded from having to expose, the ingredients in their foods, because they're changing their menus all the time, and that would be, quite a tall task to constantly, be upgrading those menus with ingredients. On the other hand, the fast food restaurants that you find all over the country and the world, their menus change, pretty slowly. It takes them a long time to change out a menu, and they're only going to be changing a few things here and there, some things that they want to try out. But overall, their menus stay fairly consistent over time. So when I was looking online to answer the question, which fast food restaurants do reveal their ingredients, I found about a dozen actually do that, out of the hundreds of possible fast food restaurants. So I made a decision not to cover all 12, because I would have wound up with a Bible thick book. Yeah. So I chose three very popular restaurants that kind of ran the gamut across, choices of cuisine. So, I chose McDonald's because of the all-American cuisine, and Pizza Hut, kind of Italian related, right? And then for Mexican food, Taco Bell. So I thought they might be really the best representatives of all the restaurants out there. Plus, they're super big. They have thousands of stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was
Well,
a good in cuisine in quotes, by the way. Cuisine taken very lightly.
well, and I don't think there's anybody that's listening that thinks that any fast food restaurant is healthy. And what was that? The documentary by Morgan Spurlock that he did, where he ate at McDonald's for 30 days, and we saw what happened to him right before our very eyes.
Yeah, Supersize Me.
Supersize Me.
Yeah. Supersize Me. Well, and in the podcast, which I want to point people to, and I will link up to, I'll drop some links here in the chat because I highly recommend that people listen to that, because I know Rip and Mel aren't interested necessarily in just rehashing everything that was in that episode, because we wanted to take questions from you and really talk about, our day-to-day lives and things that we consume that we might think are healthy.
Great. And we got some questions coming in.
Yeah.
Good.
So let's throw some up there.
Think of this as maybe a little mini food science class that's going to open up.
I love it.
So, and keep in mind, Mel, we realize that, you may not know everything. And if we don't know the answer, we'll just let people know. But this question from Linda Rip. Linda, love your last name. Is sugar-free peanut butter powder safe? Is sugar-free peanut butter powder safe? I guess we'd have to know what the ingredients are, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we would. Is there something replacing the sugar? Is there artificial sweetener?
I'll be right back because I have a jar or two of two different brands. I'll be right back. Right. And I hear, I'm not sure if you're typing, Mel.
No.
Okay, I hear something rattling a little bit.
Yeah, weird. Okay, well, we'll find out about that one. How about this one?
While we're waiting, I could add some remarks there. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to be using sweetened peanut butter. There's several, companies, I don't know how many, but that make the simply peanut butter out of peanuts, and usually they're salty. So it's essentially a whole food. Why do you need to have all the additives in there? Now, one of the reasons is some people don't like to open up a jar of peanut butter and see the oil floating on top, which is the natural peanut oil, right? And then have to stir that up. And I know I've made a mess, doing that sometimes, gotten the peanut butter and the oil all over me. But, given enough time and effort, you can homogenize that peanut butter. And once it's pretty homogenized, then you can stick it in the refrigerator, and it mostly stays that way. So usually these other ingredients in peanut butter are there to make it homogeneous, so you don't have to struggle with it. And they may be in there as preservatives as well. Now, why would you want sugar in your peanut butter? I have no idea. I mean, there's sugar in everything. Well, why do you need more sugar in your peanut butter?
Well, you know what? Let me add to that. When you say homogenized, you mean like to stir up?
Exactly. Make it uniform. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's really interesting and there's some weird clicking going on from somebody.
I know.
And it's not.
Yeah.
I wonder how that is.
I know.
It has to do with the sound, because it only happens,
Yeah, I wonder if it's your cable that you plugged in for the battery.
I can try unhooking it, and hopefully I'll have enough power for this. How's that?
Let's see. Can you? Yeah.
No.
Well.
Nope. That is weird, everybody. Okay, this is live. Today's probably our most live episode ever.
Yeah. We apologize about the weird clicking noises.
I'll unplug my computer, see if that's it. Nope. Well, and I will.
Wait, let me finish. Okay. Let me finish, and then we'll take it to you.
Okay.
So, Mel, I know exactly what you're saying. I don't know why people buy anything other than just peanut butter that has roasted peanuts, period. I understand sometimes roasted peanuts and salt, but here's the thing. Like there's brands and they say no stir on them because people are lazy and they don't want to have to stir it up and get the oil everywhere, like you said. But those no stir SKUs, those no stir iterations, they have sugar, they have palm oil, and all kinds of calorie processed junk in them. So got to read those ingredients in the peanut butter.
Yeah, yeah. And I unplugged. I don't know if you guys, I unplugged everything. I wonder if Mel, okay, is it just, no, I'm not sure what it, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here because in my possession, I do not have PB2 Pure. I just have a PB2 and I have PB Fit peanut butter. I think Anne is a fan of PB2 Pure. And both of these do have some sugar in them. The PB2 regular is roasted peanuts, sugar, and salt. But no, no disguised sugar, I suppose. And then this one has peanut flour, coconut palm sugar, and salt. So there's Anne with the PB2 Pure. Anne, can you read those ingredients?
Peanut.
Just peanuts.
It's got one ingredient. Roasted peanuts.
And it's really good. And if you make it in a peanut sauce, you can't tell that it isn't regular peanut butter.
Yeah, certainly the best choice. I'm not a huge fan of PB2 mainly as a replacement for peanut butter, like, peanut butter on bread. But, as an ingredient to provide a peanut flavor, like in a peanut sauce, that would make more sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. Sonny,
Plus it has about 1.5 grams of fat versus 16 per 2 tablespoons.
Did you hear that? So it has 1.5 grams of fat per tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, as opposed to 2 tablespoons of peanut butter.
Which I think is 16.
That is probably more like, let's see, it's 16, like 1.5 grams versus 16. That's dramatic.
When you think about it, it has to undergo some processing, though, to get that in that form. They've got to strip out the peanut oil.
Right. And so are you saying that in going through that processing, that is a unhealthy or bad thing?
Depends upon how they're doing it. They don't have to reveal how they come up with the PB2 powder. I mean, there's 2 reasons for that processing. One is to get rid of the oil to make it a low fat food. The other is to be able to convert it to a solid, so they can put it in a jar and you can portion it out by the teaspoon or the tablespoon. If there was a lot of oil in that, they couldn't make a solid powder out of it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Well, there we have it.
Next question is, how do you feel about flavoring in flavored coffee?
Oh gosh.
Is she talking about natural flavorings?
Well, and I think this bears a discussion of what you did address a little bit on the podcast, which is natural flavor versus artificial flavoring, and even the marketing hype that can go around things like that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, flavors or flavorings can be put in one of 2 categories, as you mentioned, natural or synthetic, or another word for synthetic is artificial. In the case of natural flavors, the companies kind of are banking on the fact that the consumer is going to be sucked in by the word natural, which is a little deceiving. Now, natural does mean that the flavor has to be sourced from some natural food material. So it could be from the plant world, could be, say, from mushrooms, could be from seafood or meat. So, the origin's got to be a natural source, as opposed to artificial flavors, which are essentially laboratory made ingredients, which then are scaled up for manufacturing. And those are just totally just chemicals, they, they're, they're synthesized as opposed to obtained from natural foods. So there's the distinction. And it's best to stay away from synthetic ingredients overall, in my opinion, because you know nothing about how that material was made. There's just endless numbers of processes used in chemistry manufacture or food manufacturing facilities that make artificial food ingredients, and you don't know what winds up being ultimately in these artificial flavors. Now, the FDA, and thankfully for this, they have limits. What kind of impurities are in these products, and so they're going to say, there can only be X parts per million or X parts per billion of impurities or toxic materials in these foods. But the one thing you don't know is how much of this are you getting overall from all your foods. Or if you're eating only one food all the time, well, then you maybe feel pretty assured that everything's okay. You're not going to overdose on the toxic aspects of the ingredients. But if you're eating a whole bunch of foods that have synthetic chemicals in them, you have no idea, and the government is not following that. They're not looking at the total amount of toxic ingredients you might be consuming over a day, a month, a year, whatever. Mm. And the other thing that most people don't think about is, are there interactive effects? When you buy a pharmaceutical, you get an insert with that drug, right? And it lists, all the potential interactions, it can have, say, with other drugs. And that might cause, one effect to be enhanced and cause that product to be, cause that drug to be, more hazardous to have stronger side effects. But there are no constraints on foods, on food ingredients. So you have no idea what one synthetic ingredient, how that's interacting with another one in a food. So just throwing that in, just another question mark.
Yeah. Considered
what you're eating and how it's best probably just to avoid those if possible.
Mel, it seems like there's a couple substances, like, for example, sugar, different kinds of fat, oils, sodium, that the food industry is egregiously using in all of their kind of products, especially fast food. What are some of the ways that the industry disguises, for example, sugars? Is there a way that they do it, or a way that they make them appear healthier than they are? Like, for example, fruit juice concentrate, which is really just sugar, right?
Yeah. We got to be careful with the word sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar has a specific meaning and sort of a general meaning. So you have to put it in context. The specific meaning is, as far as this country is concerned, is sugar is composed of sucrose. That's what makes it sweet. And that sucrose can be obtained from primarily two plant sources. One is cane sugar plants, and the other is beet sugar plants. And so when we use the word sugar, generally speaking, that's probably what's being referred to. Now, sugar in general, or sugars, can also represent sweeteners. So when you open up the door to sweeteners, well, now you're talking about all kinds of things that can make foods and beverages sweet. So you mentioned fruit juices. Well, fruit juices have several, if not more, kinds of sugars in them that can act as sweeteners. And so, yeah, you can concentrate the fruit juice and make it sweeter and sweeter. And, it can have a similar effect to maybe consuming an equal amount of cane sugar or beet sugar.
Right. Right. Well, it just seems like if I go on a label, for example, some cereals, kind of trashy cereals, there may be upwards of 8 to 10 different types of sweeteners that they list on the ingredients.
Okay, so you're talking about when you say disguising, you mean they're breaking them down, not breaking them down, but they're using different sources of sweeteners to make it appear as if there's not one dominant source
Well,
of sugar.
I think you're right, because you said in the restaurant business, maybe they don't have to list it in the order of from prominent to least prominent, but in the food arena, they have to.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, like, I don't know, frosted flakes.
Sure.
Right?
One of my
Probably.
favorites as a kid. Brings back good memories.
I know. But there's probably 5 to 8 different types of sweeteners in that cereal.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the real question would be, why do they need to add all these different sweeteners? Is it just simply to kind of fool people? Or are there other reasons? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, don't you think they spread it out over the ingredient deck so that cane sugar isn't the first ingredient?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But I can't think of any like functional reason they may be using a whole bunch of different sweeteners to get the effect.
Right. Yeah. Very bizarre.
To that point, Dave D asked, what are important things to look for on a label, Mel, that can either help us or that we should be cautionary of?
Okay. Well, going back to PB2, the number of ingredients, looking at the pure PB2, there was it one ingredient?
Just peanuts.
It was just peanuts. I mean, you can't beat that. So I would look first at the number of ingredients, and kind of an artificial cutoff would be if it has more than 20 ingredients in it. I would definitely hesitate and look at it more carefully to see if you should be consuming it. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, in that if you pick up a product which is 100% or mainly organic in nature and read the ingredient list, it might have 20 good organic ingredients in there. And so the number in that case wouldn't matter so much. But in general, first thing, just look to see how many ingredients are in that product. The more that are in it, the more likely that food is not going to be a healthy one to eat. It may taste great, it may smell great, it may have all other great properties, but as far as your long-term health is concerned, probably not.
I need to show this because I think this is fantastic. According to Keith, the potato was just deemed the state vegetable of Oregon.
Woo!
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they're great, but you got to look at what other products are made from them.
Yeah. And for instance, and again, this is not PB2 Pure, this is regular PB2, but it says something like, here's where the deception comes in, because as a normal consumer, you have certified gluten-free. Okay, I've heard about this gluten thing. That sounds good. Certified vegan, I'm in. 90% less fat when prepared as directed, but I think it's 90% less fat than the traditional USDA peanut butter. 6 grams of protein, got to get our protein right there on the, so they put these things that you're like, oh, these are amazing, but none of that actually says healthy.
Right. Yeah, that's because in this country, we don't have what's called front of package labeling requirements. It's kind of surprising as advanced and technological as the United States is. There are no federal laws that require companies to post a label on front of their packaged foods that tells you anything about how healthy they are. They can put some things like you were reading a moment ago, to promote what's in their product. But other countries, and in my book, I go over this in one of the chapters, particularly in Europe, but other countries like in South America, Chile, in Central America, Mexico. Mexico actually is way ahead of us as far as front of package labeling goes. And that it's hard to say that over and over again. But the front of package labeling in these countries, it's not uniform. They have different systems that are adopted depending upon the country. But they usually give you an indication of the harmful type ingredients in the foods, like how much saturated fat, how much cholesterol, how much salt, etc. And then they give a score to that product, and that score, say, may range from 0 to 5, making something up, but some kind of indicator, or maybe A to E, for very good to very bad. So it gives you an indicator right when you pick up the package or the bottle or the can, and it tells the consumer, so they can make their decision pretty quickly and easily, as long as they understand what they're reading, instead of having to turn the bottle around or the package around and look at the nutrition facts label and the ingredient list and try to conjure up for themselves a conclusion about how healthy that product is. And this, yeah. Let me say one more thing. And the front of package labeling may include, they all include some nutritional determination, okay? But some of them also include how processed the food is. And for me, you need both of those pieces of information to really draw a firm conclusion whether you should eat it or not, take the risk. Maybe it's in the middle. So, I'm not going to eat this all the time, so I'll eat it this one time or every once in a while. So those two things together, the nutrition information and the processing information, or I call it the industrialization of the food, are important pieces to make good decisions. Yeah.
I'm amazed that you said this was in Italy or in Europe somewhere?
Most countries in Europe, yeah.
I'm amazed that they can somehow, there's a body that can find consensus.
Well, it's called the EU. European Union.
Okay, that the EU can find consensus around what actually denotes something that is, health. Where did that criteria come from based upon all the different dietary preferences that are out there and the so-called science about, saturated fats are good. Oh, they're evil. Cholesterol's bad. No, cholesterol's good. Wow.
Yeah. There is a professor of nutrition. His name's Carlos Monteiro, who's at University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And he's credited with coming up with the beginnings of that, of the process of deciding on how to rate processed foods. And it's called the NOVA system that he came up with, NOVA. When I first read about that, I thought, well, he's talking about an exploding star here.
Yeah.
And actually, I guess that's probably correct. I thought maybe it was also an acronym for something, but it's not. But he basically broke down processed foods in 4 categories, and they were category category 1, 2, 3, and 4. Or you might say class A, class 2, etc.
Yeah.
And it was really the first time anybody tried to put commercial foods into different categories. And as the number goes up, the food item gets worse and worse in terms of its choice. So when you get to number 1 are just like whole foods, so apples, broccoli, mushrooms, or whatever. As long as they're untreated, unprocessed, they wind up in category 1. If you go down to category 4, that's when you start taking into consideration all of these manufactured synthetic substances that are added to foods for various reasons. And the more of those that are present, the unhealthier the food is. And there's been a number of research studies to point fingers at that conclusion. That's another chapter in my book. I go over 10 research studies that really suggest that the more concentrated a diet is and ultra processed foods, the higher the risk of acquiring lifestyle diseases like heart disease, stroke, cancer,
Yeah.
other things.
Well, maybe we discussed this on the podcast, Mel, and I don't recall, but what, in your opinion, is the difference between something that is processed and ultra processed?
Okay, processed, that's sort of a generic word. At one time, it may have had a more specific meaning, but I think nowadays it has too general a meaning to really provide information to people and consumers. If you say, hey, that food is processed, well, it could be an apple that had dirt washed off of it, or maybe some remains of insects, that might deter people from buying it because of the appearance. So washing is a process. You're not like picking it off the tree and eating it directly. But what you really want to look at is the degree of processing. So that's why I list an apple as a non-processed food.
Yeah.
Just washing it. But if you're taking an apple and then you're converting it to apple sauce, well, it's got to go through several stages of processing, to get to the apple sauce, and then the apple sauce might have other things added to it, like more sugar, cinnamon, spices, whatever. So you could then have a slightly processed food at that point. Now, I started replacing the word processed with industrialized, because I think industrialized brings home the point that this is something going on in a factory, okay, not in somebody's kitchen. And so the more manufacturing processes are involved, the more industrialized the food will be. So as you go from category 1, which is non-processed, then you go to slightly processed, to moderately processed, and then finally, you get to ultra processed, which, as I said before, is like the risk choice of a food to eat.
Like Apple Jacks. Cereal. Yeah.
Cereal. I remember eating Apple Jacks, but I don't know if they have any apples in them.
No, probably not. Probably not.
Probably apple flavor.
Yeah.
That's good. It's kind of like the Fruit Loops, where the fruit on Fruit Loops is spelled F-R-O-O-T.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't realize that until I was like in my 50s, probably.
I know. I think I was today years old when I realized that, actually. This is a very common question, and I think it's a really great question about natural flavors. So why do manufacturers always have to add natural flavors? And I think of like my beloved sparkling waters. I enjoy a sparkling water. And on the can, it always says natural flavors. And I'm like, what is that, first of all? And then why do they add that?
Well, as I said earlier, that's a generic term. It means absolutely nothing on the label. The only thing it tells you is that, they're using some flavors in this product, and those flavors originally, came from some natural food material. But what you don't know is what happened in between, in between the food material that it came from and the flavor that got extracted out of it. What were all the processes involved in that? And there could be some hazardous chemicals involved. There's usually going to be some kind of extraction process, which will use some kind of solvent, which might have some toxic properties to it. So on the label, like I said, doesn't really mean anything. The manufacturers have to report it because it is an ingredient, but the government, our government, gives it a pass as far as telling us exactly what are these natural flavors. And one reason why they don't have to say it is oftentimes a natural flavor may be made from a combination of a bunch of natural flavors. So if there's like 6 natural flavors that go to make up this composite flavor, then they'd have to list all those on the label separately, so that could be kind of an onerous thing for food manufacturers to do. Plus the other thing you don't really know what you might be allergic to, by not seeing those actual ingredients that are used, and you have a food allergy and one of those ingredients came from one of the foods you're allergic to, you won't know it. And there's no way to do it because those companies are not required to reveal that information. And one other thing I want to say about that, there are some of the largest companies in the world are the ones that manufacture natural and synthetic flavors. And if I said one of their names, chances are you would have never heard of them because the public does not buy directly from those companies. Those companies are dealing, food manufacturers who come to them and say, I need an apricot flavor in this product, and so they'll come up with something either natural or artificial to help that manufacturer out. And so they sell directly to food companies, not to us. So we don't even know that some of the biggest, richest, most influential companies in the world do that as their business.
Do we know what is the most popular natural flavoring in the world? Is it vanilla? Is it blueberry?
Well, I was going to make a guess. I'd say vanilla. I mean, I would never buy artificial vanilla flavoring, but it would by virtue of consumption, I would say that would be the most popular one.
So the question that I put up on the screen, you mentioned solvents and how you have no idea what solvents they use in some of this ultra processing. Don't they use solvents to extract the soy and soy protein isolates and concentrates? Is that true or not? Isn't it hexane extracted?
Yeah, that's for the soy oil. Yeah,
right.
I mean, common processing technique that's used by industry. Solvent extraction essentially just involves finding a liquid, and usually it's an organic liquid, and oftentimes what's called a non-polar solvent, which is very good for removing oils from plant materials. So in the case you mentioned, removing soy oil from soybeans, or in the case of natural flavorings, removing the flavor component, from some natural food. And so, getting back to the soybeans, they use hexanes, which is a mixture actually of nonpolar solvents that are closely by structure related to gasoline components. And so they are very effective at taking up the soybean oil and removing that oil from the rest of the soybean plant. So you've got protein to remove it from, you got fiber and other residual stuff. So once it's removed, then you have all this hexane with the vegetable oil in it. And the next step is to evaporate off the hexane. And then you can recycle the hexane and use that again in other processes. And after you remove the hexane, what's left is the oil. So at that point, it goes through some purification stages because it may not have the color that it should have when you're selling it to a consumer. It may have an odor that's objectionable. So it goes through some cleaning up phases until finally, it winds up in its in the state it can be sold in the stores.
Oh, that's really disturbing, to say the least. Wow.
Let me add this. There are some oils that are better than others. If you're a fan of olive oil and you buy the, what's it called? Not ultra virgin, extra virgin olive oil. They use more of a cold pressing process. So it doesn't go through solvent extraction. So with that kind of knowledge, it'll help you to choose the better oils to consume.
Well, as you're probably aware, we're not a fan of oils. Really, any oils. We prefer you stay away from the oils. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, look at Marley. Oh, those oils sound gross. They really do. How about, what would you say here? I would to Dorothy, I would say, how do you know what to choose with just about everything having distorted labeling? I would kind of go back to what Mel said earlier, which is, like, look for the least amount of ingredients. and then see if you can pronounce them. And that's probably a good place to start. You think, Mel?
Well, the best place to start would be to choose a whole foods plant-based diet.
Yeah.
But in our society, that can be quite a challenge. I mean, I try to follow that kind of diet, but I have to admit, I do eat processed foods here and there. I do, and I look at the labels, and I try to make healthy choices. But every once in a while, the cravings in me take over, and I'll eat something that wouldn't have been the best choice if I was thinking more clearly. But then I make an effort not to continue to eat those kinds of foods on a regular basis. I think you can get away with eating badly here and there, but just don't make a habit of it.
Mel, is there a vegan cheese that you are enamored with, that you eat at all on your pizza, if you ever have pizza?
No, I do eat vegan cheese. Every one of them has at least a handful of ingredients, if not more, on the label. So it does, like any other food product, you should be looking at that to see if there's something objectionable, something you're allergic to, something you, as Rip said, something you can't pronounce. So no, I mean, I eat Daiya cheese on frozen pizza. That's one of the occasional failings. I'll buy a frozen pizza that has Daiya cheese on it. Now, some of Miyoka Shinner's cheeses are going to be better than others, fewer ingredients and more recognizable ingredients. But most of them, are going to have this list that you need to read.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like every month or two there's a new vegan cheese that's kind of hitting the market, and they sound good.
Right.
These cashew based ones, or I mean, I think there's even a mushroom based cheese I saw recently.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're right. You're right. There's always all these new products.
Yeah.
And essentially, these companies, I don't think, are going into business because, number one, they want to sell vegan products, or number two, that they want to sell consumers something that is healthy to eat. I think what they want to do is they want to compete, with the dairy industry. And so they're trying to make cheeses that compare as closely as possible to dairy cheeses, because that's what most people have grown up with. We like the meltiness, we like the stretchiness, we like the flavors. So I think that's what these non-dairy cheese companies are shooting for.
Very much. Very, very much. Yeah. Here, Marley says here that she was at Trader Joe's today. That's what TJ stands for. And she looked at the vegan cheeses for pizza tonight, and she's like, ugh, they're all full of coconut oil.
That's a common one. Yeah.
It is. It is. Do you have any thoughts on speaking of like coconut oil and saturated fat? Do you have any thoughts on coconut oil or palm oil, which seems to be very popular these days?
I'm familiar with the controversy around coconut oil, that it's high in saturated fats compared to other plant oils. So sometimes you'll see, food scientists or food experts, caution, or medical people caution you to stay away from coconut oil. I don't know that there has been definitive research to indicate that that's going to be, say, a problem for your heart.
Yeah.
And be something that'd be kind of hard to do an experiment on, to do a really good experiment on. That's, a randomly designed experiment where you take a bunch of people, feed them a diet, and the only oil they're consuming is coconut oil, versus a regular diet, that has a mixture of other kinds of oils in it. So I don't think you get many people volunteering for that kind of experiment. And to be really a really good study with good evidence-based conclusions, you'd have to do that study over a period of time with a fairly large cohort or group of people to draw really good conclusions. So So people give their opinions for one reason or another, but I don't know that I would necessarily say that one person is more trustworthy over another.
Yeah, I think actually, I think it'd be pretty easy to find a cohort that would be willing to do just coconut oil for about a year or two. There's people I know that do shots of coconut oil before every meal.
Wow.
They're convinced that it is like the new Exceler, right?
Is that the coffee fat mix?
That's one of the Dave Asprey Bulletproof Me. Yeah.
Bulletproof, yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, these fads and new diets are never ending. I mean, I don't think we talked about this in the podcast, but the latest kid on the block, it's like the newest version of paleo and keto. It's called it's not even carnivore. It's called the lion diet, where all you eat is meat and salt and water.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Rip, because I was listening to another podcast, and a name came up in the podcast. It was Dr. Anthony Chaffee. And they said that this doctor promoted a carnivore diet, and all he ate was meat and water. And he's been doing that for like 20 years. But I got curious about it. I went online because he's got some apparently popular videos that he's posted, describes this diet and why he's eating it. And he has all these reasons why plants are toxic to people. So I was wondering, even before this live session started, I was going to even bring him up to you to see if you had any information and if that's something you should maybe delve into for your podcast. You got to look at the other side and see if their reasoning and logic has any truth to it. And this guy is a medical physician and a surgical neurologist, I think.
Yeah, I will
we'll look it up. Yeah. Somebody was asking about texturized soy product, and it might be an extension of the.
I think it's an extension of the
like the protein isolates.
Soy protein isolates. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. As I mentioned on the podcast, I have a really great memory. There's like 3 different versions of soy protein. And I think what you mentioned there were 2 of those 3. If you just separate the protein component from soy and don't do anything else with it, then you've just got a high protein source. And it may have, if I remember right, maybe 60% or something. It's a pretty high number. Maybe it's 40 to 60%.
40 on soy.
40. If you then take it to the next level and process it some more, then you can increase the protein content significantly. That's where the protein isolates come in. I'm not quite remembering the numbers. Was it 80, 90%? You familiar with that, Rip? Of protein?
80.
80.
Like 80. Yeah.
And then the next step after that would be to put it through a machine called an extruder. And under high pressure and heat, you pass this high protein material through it, and it like beats it up. And in that beating up process, changes the consistency of it. It becomes more meat-like.
Mm-hmm.
So those are sort of the stages, and they're from less processed to more processed.
Yeah.
So stay away, I think, is the or use very, very sparingly, I think is the.
Yeah. So Mel, I want to dive into this, and maybe this is our last subject that we can try and tackle. And love to get you on as a once every couple months, because this is really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, this field is so huge. Never run out of topics.
No. And I think we touched upon this, but I want to just kind of delve into it again. Like a lot of these plant-based milks are using phosphates, stabilizers, emulsifiers, gums, oils, as stabilizing agents. Are these healthy or unhealthy? Do they have any merit other than, keeping things from basically separating?
Well, I mean, you have to look at them on an individual basis.
Yeah.
Some are going to be healthier than others. Some might have some health warnings. One of the problems with this subject matter is that food ingredients that are sanctioned by the FDA for the United States are sometimes banned in other countries, particularly the European Union. And so,
can you give me an example of something?
I know, like some of the dyes, some of the
that's
color red
artificial dyes. Okay, so
Yeah.
just like flavors, you have natural and artificial dyes, and the artificial dyes, you'll often see them labeled as F, D, and C. And F, D, and C stands for food, drug, and cosmetics, because that's where they're used. And then you'll see a number following them, like F, D, and C blue 4. So you'll see the color, and that number is designated by the FDA. If you got time for an interesting side story, as these artificial colors were found or synthesized, they received a number. So all of them, whatever color you're interested in, yellow, red, blue, green, they all started out as number 1. Okay. And then the next version came along and it was number 2 and then number 3 and so on. Well, the reason these numbers had these new substances with the higher numbers came along was because the earlier ones got banned.
Oh, wow.
And they got removed from the FDA sanction list. And so they had to be replaced. So the higher the number of these F, D, and C colors, that tells you, how many other versions got eliminated along the way.
Oh,
that is fascinating. But it doesn't tell you the timeline. Like, what do you think the timeline is between? What are they up to now?
Well, some of them might be up to 8, 9, 10, even high. I don't remember what the highest one I've seen. But these colors have been around since the late 1800s. So, it's taken over 100 years in some cases to ditch them or replace them. Wow. But anyway, answering your question, now I'm going to need a reminder.
Yeah, it was basically about all the gums, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and all literally virtually almost all the plant-based milks.
Yeah, it had to do with the European Union. I think.
Yeah.
She mentioned that these artificial colors, the F, D, and C colorings, might receive a thumbs down by the European Union and a thumbs up here. And that's because of information, knowledge, experimentation. The committees in the European Union who evaluate these ingredients, they look at the literature, they look at the studies that have been done and determine, whether they should go ahead and put these on the list of ingredients that are safe to use. So the FDA uses a different set of considerations. So that's a simple way of answering that question. There's going to be differences among different agencies around the world and how they determine whether something's safe or not.
Yep.
Oh, and these food colorings, if I remember right, you can help me out, Carrie. You seem to know something about this. Didn't they have to do with hyperactivity in children?
I only know that anecdotally because a friend of mine, her daughter is highly allergic to like red dye 5 or red 55. I'm not sure, but yeah, and she was very much affected by it with ADHD and just all these different allergies because of that one chemical. So
right.
Yeah,
I think in this country, food manufacturers do have to report the F, D, and C colors.
Yeah,
that's definitely a requirement.
So eye-opening today has been.
It absolutely has, Mel. So we're going to wind it down right now. I want to thank you for joining us today. I look forward to doing more of these with you, with this great, wonderful background and knowledge that you have into this very important topic. thank you for being on the podcast yesterday. Everybody listening, this is just a little teaser. Go if you want to learn a lot more. Listen to the podcast that Mel and I did. It dropped yesterday on anywhere where you listen to your Plant Strong podcast. Carrie, we have a special lineup next Friday for our Facebook Live. It's Ann and Essie. We're going to get a little update on my parents, Ann and Essie. Have all your questions ready because we're going to fire them at them. And it's all good, isn't it, Carrie?
It's so good in the hood. Yeah, no, I can't wait to be on the background of that live and to get the update on Ann and Essie, our everybody's favorite parents.
Hey, Mel, you take it easy. Give me a little Plant Strong fist bump on the way out.
All right. Thanks a lot for it was a lot of fun. I like the looseness of this format.
Yeah, so do we. And next time we'll get the technical difficulties resolved ahead of time.
Yes. All right. Mel, have a great weekend. Hopefully your day gets better. Love it. Take care.
All right. Keep it Plant Strong, everybody.
Bye.
And read those.